Let's bow in. Good evening, everyone. As we continue our progress through the volume 3 of the Profound Treasury of the Ocean of Dharma, tonight we're doing chapter 9, the total surrendering of samsaric logic. And Michael is going to take it away.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Yes, the title of this chapter is The Total Surrendering of Samsaric Logic. So that's what we're going to be working with. It begins with a very short excerpt where Trungpa Rinpoche says that Vajrayana mind protection can only occur when we have a Vajra Guru. Then you and the Guru in combination perform Vajrayana disciplines, and as a result, you attain final enlightenment. The reason this is true, or what's true about this that we should recognize, is that what the Guru points out to us is our inherent nature, our true nature. And this can begin in a very small way with what we come to recognize in meditation practice, just coming to see that there's a difference in our experience when we're distracted as opposed to when we're present, that we feel differently, the world looks differently when we're not caught up in thoughts and feelings and fantasies of all kinds. And this continues to expand if we, provided that we practice regularly, to Mahayana, where we increasingly discover that we can be open and available to the world, don't need to be afraid of the world around us, and come more importantly to recognize that we have Buddha nature, that we have this capability to wake up, that we have this ability to be compassionate, ability to be open. And that we come to recognize that what we're being shown by the teacher and through the teachings is really our true nature, our inherent nature. And that the more we have confidence in this, the more we come to recognize this, the more we become familiar with this through meditation practice, the more gratitude we have for the teachings and the teacher who pointed this all out to us. That we come to realize we can live in the world without struggle, that we can live in the world being open to people around us, being open to ourselves, that we can make friends with ourselves, which in a very simple way means just allowing ourselves to be as we are without relentless self-criticism, self-doubt, and that we come to recognize all of these things because of what's pointed out to us by the teacher, by the Guru. And we can come across this through students who receive this instruction from the teacher. We can come across this from the readings that we do, and we come to realize increasingly that it's true as a result of our practice. And this is ultimately what leads to mind protection. The more confidence we have that this really is our true nature, and that is what we've been reading about with the Vajrayana, that it's not just that we have Buddha nature, as a seed of some kind, but that in fact, from the Vajrayana point of view, we actually have fully realized Buddhahood available to us at any time. The question is, do we recognize it? Do we tune into it? Do we trust it? Are we able to let go of samsaric logic and surrender to that? And that's ultimately what this chapter and what this entire book is really all about. So it's in that sense that we have mind protection. When we're not able to recognize our true nature, our inherent wakefulness, when we're not able to trust in that, then we become increasingly at the mercy of external conditions, the pressures, pushes, and pulls of the world around us. We become increasingly likely to be caught up in samsaric logic, the belief in an ego, the belief in a solid self, and with that, caught up in passion, aggression, and ignorance of all kinds as we try to solidify ego, protect ego. So that's essentially what we're talking about in this chapter, and that's the samsaric logic that we're surrendering. So the first section is transforming the three gates. The three gates are body, speech, and mind. So this is the three gates of existence. And the first is physical existence, or the body. That's the first gate. And Trungpa Rinpoche in this reading just points out to us that the body looks for physical comfort and for confirmation of its existence. This is very similar to what we read in chapter 3 in the same text, where he talked about body neurosis, that we think of our body as something we'd like to hold on to keep back as private property or personal project of some kind. And it's similar to what we read in Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism with the Lord of Form. You remember back some weeks, that the neurotic pursuit of physical comfort, security, pleasure, manipulating our surroundings so as to shield ourselves from the irritations of life. That's the Lord of Form. That's body neurosis. The second gate is speech or intellect. That's the second gate. And he says here that speech provides us with further territory. And by this, what at least one way of interpreting this is that we expand our sense of ego, our sense of control, our sense of territory through concepts that we use to try to pigeonhole, label, and manipulate the world around us. And that we try to control and influence the world through speech, through our connection, through communication. And again, this is very similar to what we read in chapter 3, where he described speech neurosis as including any expressions coming from the subconscious gossip level, such as expressions of love or hate, whether frivolous or meaningful. And in Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, where he said that the Lord of Speech refers to the use of intellect in relating to our world. We adopt sets of categories which serve as handles, as ways of managing phenomena. And he says, the use of intellect itself is not the Lord of Speech, but instead is the inclination on the part of ego to interpret anything threatening or irritating in such a way as to neutralize the threat or turn it into something positive from ego's point of view. And then finally, the third gate is consciousness or mind. And mind provides a quality of manipulation whereby we can function in a world where some people love us, some people hate us, and we love and hate others as well. And in Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, he talked about the Lord of Mind as the effort of consciousness to maintain awareness of itself, holding on to self-consciousness. So the idea is what we're transforming with the three gates is precisely this tendency to hold on to ego, the tendency to identify with some sort of sense of self, which we then try to perpetuate with comfort and security, to relate to speech and communication as a way of managing, labeling, pigeonholing, freezing the world around us, and with mind, trying to maintain states of mind where, again, we have some sense of control and an illusory sense of security. He says, by working with body, speech, and mind together, we conduct all our business in an ordinary sense, that this is our ordinary state of being, the ordinary way we work with body, speech, and mind. So the point with Vajrayana is that through our discipline and through our connection with the Vajra master, we transcend these mundane states so that everything becomes regarded as sacred, that body, speech, and mind are each related to as a sacred and holy environment, so that there's actually a sense of appreciation and openness, a sense of freshness and vividness to our experience, because we're not just simply holding on and trying to make ourselves secure and comfortable, but we're actually able to open to the world. He says that obviously this is dependent on each of us individually, but evoking that quality of sacredness depends on someone who can initiate that possibility. And he actually says that the provocation is provided by the deities of Vajrayana, the various Vajrayana principles or deities. But it's very clear that these deities are basically natural reflections of our own Vajra nature, our own inherent nature, though they manifest as a power source in the beginning. And he says also that at this point, there's a need for a teacher to push us into this situation. And then finally, there's ourselves, who can be provoked into that situation. So in talking about sacredness, again, I wanted to refer back to chapter 3, and just a brief excerpt, where he talks about that the sense of sacredness comes about from the continuity of Tantra. So remember that when we talk about continuity of Tantra, essentially what we're talking about is the continuity of awakened mind, the continuity of our inherent wakefulness. And what he says, our inherent openness, our inherent compassion. So that sense of sacredness comes about from the continuity of Tantra. Tantra literally means continuity, but what we're talking about is continuous, is our capacity to wake up, our capacity to be present, our capacity to be open to ourselves and open to others. He says, when our body, speech, and mind are synchronized, we're fully here. Because we're fully here, we can't help but experiencing natural warmth, natural isness, natural brilliance. If we're here with our body, speech, and mind joined together, that kind of reality begins to dawn on us. So again, what's being pointed out to us, what's being reflected for us, what's being pointed out, what we're being asked to recognize, is nothing other than our inherent nature, our true selves. He gives a couple of analogies here, interesting analogies for what this process is. Somebody's not muted, and for that reason, we're getting some echo. Anyway.
Take care of it.
Okay, thank you. So the analogies he uses really show what it means in terms of a total surrender of samsaric logic, because both of them are pretty stark. And what they reminded me of, this is kind of a simpler level, maybe, than what these analogies are. When I was being trained in doing family therapy, I was repeatedly urged by the person who was supervising me to tell this particular family that I was working with was that they needed to do something different from everything they'd tried before, because they had done everything they had thought of and nothing had worked. And on a much vaster, more profound level, that's what we're talking about here. That anything we've tried to do from the point of view of ego, anything we've tried to do that preserves ego, anything that we've done that comes out of the conceptual mind that is an expression of ego, isn't going to work, that we have to let go entirely. So the analogy he uses, the first analogy, is talking about jumping off a cliff properly and thoroughly. That to do this, we need someone who encourages us to do it and maybe even gives us an extra push. And the person who gives us the push is the Vajra master, and that the cliff itself and the space beyond represent the deities. So there's a complete letting go into openness, a complete letting go into a world without reference point. There's a complete letting go of ego. Obviously, we're not being urged to literally commit suicide, which is what the next analogy also relates to. But we're talking about letting go of anything that involves the neurotic, a neurotic connection with body, speech, and mind in the way that we talked about. And in that sense, from the point of view of ego, it is a suicide, because we're totally letting go of anything that's familiar and comfortable from an ego point of view. And that's the other analogy that he gives, of harakiri, or ritual suicide in the Japanese tradition, that we are the person who's going to commit harakiri. The sword is the deities, which again is nothing other than basically natural reflections of our own Vajra nature. And that the court, or the audience who watches us do this and encourages us and expects us to follow through, is the Vajra master. But altogether, again, what we're talking about is, shocking perhaps as these analogies are, is really totally surrendering the samsaric logic. It's what we began with was some sense of renunciation in the Hinayana, carried to the point of being able to totally let go of conventional mind, conventional ego, and relax completely into openness. And that's in fact the next section, opening the door to Vajrayana, where Trungpa Rinpoche says it's impossible for a beginning student to relate to the Vajrayana teachings without the Vajra master opening the door of Vajrayana to that student. The Vajra master opens the experience of Vajrayana to you. He says the reason the Vajra master is so important is that we're still wrapped up in the Mahayana realization of the egolessness of dharmas. We've soaked ourselves in Mahayana benevolence, but are unable to go beyond Mahayana saviorship. So it's important to keep in mind that in these talks, these seminary talks, where he's presenting the Vajrayana, that the people hearing these teachings, like us, are hearing these things really for the first time. That what they've been through at seminary are the Hinayana teachings and the Mahayana teachings, and now he's actually telling people that there's something beyond that, but that this is completely new to his audience. So basically what he's saying is we need to go beyond Mahayana saviorship. He says there's an extraordinary power, ultimate enlightenment that we're still not accepting, and that's why we're held back. And he says we might be a good Mahayanist, willing to clean a lot of diapers for sentient beings, willing to work with a lot of social situations. But from the point of view of Vajrayana, so what? That we're missing the point unless we're able to click further and join the Vajrayana hordes. And this is and then he says, if you can just dive in, if we can just let go completely of any reference point, including the reference point of saviorship, which doesn't mean that we don't continue being generous, disciplined, patient, exerting ourselves, practicing meditation and developing prajna. But there's some beyond any kind of reference point with Vajrayana. We let go further. If we can just dive in, the heroic aspect of Mahayana could become Vajra-like and monolithic. He says Mahayanas might begin to feel that their realization is not diamond-like, not Vajra-like enough. They might have heard about the Vajra Samadhi, but a furthering of that adamantine quality has not been available to them, so they are still hungry. It's as if the Hinayanas had a good breakfast and the Mahayanas had a great lunch, so they are looking forward to a fantastic dinner party because something is still lacking. And I think this is the key sentence here. You can never quite be in the world if you are always regarding samsara as something to be gotten beyond. You can never quite be in the world if you are always regarding samsara as something to be gotten beyond. The idea of transmutation has not yet taken place. So that's the critical point. And I think that's why he gives analogies as powerful and challenging and make us question things as jumping off a cliff or committing harakiri. Again, not that we're literally doing that, but that from the point of view of ego, that's what we're experiencing. And that any sense of holding back, any sense of anything less than complete involvement in our world is somehow lacking something. And so with that, the next section is surrendering, and I'll turn it over to John at this point.
Thank you, Michael. Really what this is about is a very profound transformation of our world. From a world filled with thought, grayed out with thought, to a world without thought, where thought is irrelevant, to a world of phenomenal presence all the time, in which we are without self-doubt, without self-approbation. All of those things are irrelevant. Those are the things of thought. And really, this is the world of reality that we're being asked to enter. And the Vajra Master, the Guru, is the one who invites us in. And we have to be ready. So he talks about surrendering. What are we surrendering? We're surrendering all of the stuff of thought, of ambition, of fear, of hope, of all of those things. He says, in order to wake up, in order to wake the human mind of Hinayana and Mahayana, it is absolutely necessary to have an object of surrender. Surrendering what? Surrendering all this stuff of thought. Beyond logic and beyond any philosophy, even beyond a measure of kindness, all of that stuff is irrelevant, because what is real is what is happening right now. And by surrendering all of that other stuff, we affirm the reality and the primacy of the experiences that we're having in the present moment, which are vivid, colorful, full of heart and meaning. At this point, you are surrendering everything, all your reservations. That total surrender is actually seeing things as they are, instead of seeing things through a veil of thought, a veil of hope and fear. For that to happen, the illogical master, he says, illogical, because he's contravening any kind of logic, really, to bring us into this world, begins to come into your life and cuts samsaric logic altogether. Samsaric logic says, if I do this, I'll get that. I better watch out for the other. All those kinds of things. I'm hopeful, I'm fearful. All of that has to go. And one comes into this presence, this awareness with which we were born, which is always here, but which we cloud away, cloud out with the stuff of thought. He says, if there is no Vajra master, it is impossible for students to click into the Vajrayana path because they are still involved in reasoning. That's what this Vajra master's job is to bring the student beyond reason, beyond logic, beyond all of that stuff has to do with self-aggrandizement, self-improvement. And all of that has to go. It's the stuff of ego. Although the Hinayana and Mahayana are trying their best to cut through the student's reasoning mind, that cutting through process has itself become reasonable. It's become a philosophy, a method, a technique, instead of simply acknowledging this, which is what the Vajra master gets the student to do. Together, they create a tremendous awakening and acknowledgement of this world as it arises in the present moment. The Vajra master becomes the unreasonable figure who does not buy any of your trips, not even the holiest of your trips. It's all baloney. But at the same time, your mind, your Vajra essence mind, is protected by the Vajra master. Your Vajra essence mind, that's the real mind. That's this mind that never quits, that's always here, luminous, clear, full of the passing and arising and passing of phenomena. He says that is why the Vajrayana is referred to as mantrayana. Mantra means mind protection. So the Vajrayana is called the vehicle of mind protection, the vehicle, the yana of mantra. Why? Because we're protected from that logical, reasoning, self-aggrandizing, scheming, fearful, hopeful mind, which is full of suffering and doubt, uncertainty. And all of that has to go. You just let it go. It's just momentarily there. And every time we come present, which is what the Vajra master helps us do, every time we come completely present here, relaxed, effortless, that's gone. That's samsaric mind. That protection has two sides. You're clicking into the Vajra master and the Vajra master clicking to you. And this produces a definite bond between the two. It's the opening of the two minds to each other, sometimes called the meeting of the two minds. In order to get into the Vajrayana, you have to give up your expectations as to what the Vajra master might be. All expectations have to go. So your mind is protected from expectations that would interfere with the actual surrendering process. The surrendering process is really one of completely coming present, giving up the demand, giving up the hope, giving up the fear as well, the fearfulness. By protecting the student's mind, the Vajra master also acts as an agent for the deities. The deities represent the principles of awakening, the principles of this beautiful, powerfully awake world that is constantly arising all around us. This is what the deities are. And they speak to us, asking us to join them, in awakeness, if that's a word, in waking up, in coming present and appreciating the vividness of these phenomena, which is what the deities are. It's a magic world compared to the world of ego, which is so attempting to be logical, predictable, known. He says it can be dangerous if you don't have enough faith in your Vajra master, if you're trying to con him or her. Really, he says your same old logic or trying to get something can go on and on. You can get stuck in it. If you cannot get away from that, it will be disastrous for you in the Vajrayana. You will end up in a realm of utter pain and claustrophobia. That's what you do not want. You want to be open, relaxed, present, giving. It's the complete, utter generosity beyond any notion of giving or generosity. It's complete open space inside one. So the role of the Vajra master is crucial and much larger than that of the spiritual friend at the Mahayana level. The Vajra master does not try to do a good job or interpret the teachings. The approach of being your psychologist or therapist or trying to do good things for you does not apply to the Vajra master. They are holding the door open to reality. That's what this person is doing. The Vajra master is also not using the Vajrayana to get a credential, the last thing this person wants to do. Doing that is disastrous. There's just no interest in that whatsoever on the part of the Vajra master. The whole relationship between Vajra master and student has to be professional, by the book, a business deal. It just means it's very clean. If there's no baloney, there's no hopefulness and fearfulness. It is a business-like attitude, a business approach, because very simply, everything involved in your life is your concern. Everything. And there are no hidden corners. It is the Vajra world, so everything in your life is part of your business. You take everything on yourself, all the energies of the world, and that involves tremendous responsibility, daring, and heroism. It's not that you're jumping off a cliff literally, or going skydiving, or jumping out of a plane in a parachute, but the tremendous daring and heroism comes from giving up ego. Ego with its constant search for reference points, its constant demand to know where it's going and where it's been. All that goes, and we're entering a very different kind of world. It's the same world. It's got that screen behind, it's got this sweater on, it's got all the colors and sounds, and yet it has no place that it's heading towards or coming from. It's just arising and passing away in the moment, full of color, heart, all kinds of things. Sticking with true Dharma. He says, don't try to rationalize the Vajrayana. That'd be a crime. You can't even do it. They'd make a joke out of it. You would be caught up in some teeny little fiction. You cannot afford to interpret and reinterpret the world of Vajrayana at all. There is no choice but to stick to the true Dharma. And it's always a matter of coming present, a flashing sacred world, this beautiful world of coming back to this, of being cheerful, of being uplifted, of letting go of depression, of hope and fear, and all the rest. Don't try to interpret or pervert the teachings. If you do, you will be eaten up at the Vajrayana level. He says, don't bring your past into it, but do bring your present. So you're not using the teachings or reinterpreting them for ego's benefit. Ego always wants to get something. These teachings are about letting go of all of that. Don't try to use whatever you may have been given to give validity to the teachings in your own way, like being a psychologist or a poet, to try and rationalize them. It is your own distorted way which is not good. You will be perverting the teachings. The teachings are what they are. I wrote down here, sui generis. They are their own kind. They are only what they are. They can't be classified as anything else. This reality that they're pointing to, it's one of a kind. At this point, you should just try to understand what is being said. That is all. Just study and discuss what you study with others. Relate to how you feel rather than to how you've been decorated by your background. Everybody is just a student, a gray dot, and everyone's past has been forgotten for a while. You don't need it. It's right here, this, and the future too. You are studying the Dharma, nothing more, so you do not try to play one-upsmanship or prove that you are smarter than others. When you study the Vajrayana, keep it simple. You are just a student of the Dharma. That is all. Keep it simple. No plans for the future, no regrets or analyzing of the past, just living here and now. This is a very fierce and uncompromising chapter. I mean, it's really the heart of the Vajrayana, the relationship with the Vajra master, with the Guru, and what the Guru does for us, which is to bring us out of the world of ego, out of the world of logic, out of the world of thoughts about the past and the future. All the schemes and fears, all that goes. It's a very different world we're entering. We're being asked to enter. We're being invited to enter. We're being encouraged to enter. So I'll stop there, and we can have a discussion.
Mark.
Hi. Yeah, I really found this exciting. And I want to get your take on the way I'm interpreting this. So it's telling us to drop samsaric logic, which essentially is the logic that we generally use in the world around us, which is the samsaric world. And then I was asking myself, are the deities real or imagined? And then I was thinking, does it really matter? Or what's the difference? And that sounds kind of crazy, but there's a show on Netflix, and it's something. It says if you Netflix Infinity, you'll see this wonderful show on infinity, and at some point mathematically they prove that infinity is zero, that they're the same. I'm just saying, it's, our world is built on I don't know, it's a sandcastle. There's a lot we can question in the samsaric world, the logic that we hold on to. Anyway, what do you think of that?
I try not to think of it.
Well, it gives me comfort. It gives me great comfort because the world, everything isn't as we see it to be. And I think it's miraculous and interesting. And it talks about staying on the Dharma path. That's the only real, I believe that was one of the sentences about that's what we do, and about the moment. Anyway, that's it.
Thank you, Mark. That was great.
Thank you.
I think we're being asked to jump off a cliff. That's what he uses in that, I think, metaphorically. And what the cliff is the cliff of logical thought that has to do with past and future, and has to do with an identity of me and my past and future, and you and your pasts and futures. And we're being asked to let it go. This is the extreme truth, you might say, of the Vajrayana, of Tantrayana, and of what the Vajra master presents to the student if the student is open to receiving it. And it's really an entrance and an invitation and an entrance into a different world. It's the same world, and yet it's a very different world. It's not going anywhere. It has no history. It has no future. It is simply what it is as it unfolds now, vividly, powerfully. But we are constantly in samsara, giving it a past and a future, which gives it a whole history and a meaning, as though we could take the past and project the future from it, and somehow give our egos, ourselves, some small measure of security. But it's completely illusory. Philip.
And yet there is that part that Michael paused on at the end of his part of tonight's talk, where Rinpoche says, you can never quite be in the world if you're always regarding samsara as something to be gotten beyond. So the suggestion there seems to be that you need to embrace samsara along with everything else.
Not samsara in the sense of confusion, but the world that constitutes that we confuse, yes, that we embrace. But not the confusion, the hope, the fear, the ambition, the cleverness, all of that. That has to be jettisoned. Let go. That's suffering. That's confusion. And if we are proceeding in a way that we want to get rid of that and get something better, then we've recreated samsara. See, it's so tricky, that logic.
As long as there's a concept of samsara, we're still stuck in some point of view.
Yeah, this is a matter of giving up points of view. It's so radical.
And yet, we don't want to indulge in samsara either, but that's a whole other thing.
If we're in the moment, can we be in samsara?
What?
If we're living our life in the moment, let's say we're enlightened or whatever, can we be in a samsaric world, or a world with all these rules and everything, if we're just living in the moment?
No.
We're fully awake in the moment now.
Right.
Yeah. Because all the rest of it is seen, what you're talking about is seen as being a lie.
Mm-hmm.
And who wants to try and live a lie? Nobody.
Right.
Once you know it's a lie. This chapter is very fierce. It's really. When I read this and I thought, oh boy, here we go. No compromise. Kurt.
Yeah, this way I read this, the idea of coming up to the cliff, that we've done the Hinayana work, we've done the Mahayana work. It felt like that was our journey to the edge of the cliff. And this Vajrayana step is the step off the cliff. The way I heard that is that we need that push. We need that that shove off the cliff. And coming from the Vajra master, can we make that leap ourselves, or do we need almost the way I read it, and I don't really like this interpretation, is that we almost need the permission from the Vajra master to go over the edge. And I know it's my experience as of late with meditation when I feel like I'm coming up to that point where the ego is starting to drop away. There's a this fine edge that just it's I guess it's fear. You know, it's like, wow, what happens after I jump off this cliff? And I know you've said in the past that um, the good news is there is no ground, and but there is this fear of falling, this fear of disappearing, and how does or does the Vajra master give us that shove, and what happens, you know, or what's capable of, you know, can we, I don't know how to say it, can we get there with a shove, or can we do it on our own?
Personally, I don't think we can do it on our own. The question is, where is the Vajra master? Is he gone because Trungpa Rinpoche died? Is he here in this volume that we're reading? Is he here in the ongoing stream of the lineage? It's an open question. It truly is. Because, I mean, none of us would have come up with these ideas if we hadn't connected to those teachings in that white book, you know, that big, thick book, and the teachings that have come to us through the lineage, all these teachers coming down from the time of the Buddha. We never would have gotten to this alone. One person in eons is capable of doing that, the Sakyamuni Buddha, Shakyamuni. And the rest of us need something. And the question is, will we get what we need? Ideally, you meet someone like Trungpa Rinpoche, and he pushes you. But not always. But it can happen in friendship and in I think just reading this is powerful. Michael, do you have anything?
And sometimes, yeah, reading and circumstance, just, you know, what experiences we have in the world can open us up. From a certain point of view, we're getting pushed all the time.
I think of you, Kurt, and Meg, you know, as standing on a doorway, you know, with your art especially. That it's like an entrance into a world of vividness and magic. Not that other people don't have different versions of the same thing, but knowing you, you know, for these months and years.
Well, that is, yeah, I guess that is a view that we do have, because I mean, we haven't given up ego by any means, but we have given up a security in livelihood and a security of a way in the world and whatnot. So there is a bit of a model there, but we certainly got a lot of ego attached to art when we're not doing it. Yeah, no, it is. There is some modeling there. And I think
I mean, reality is always here, solid, vivid, powerful. The ego is like a phantom that comes and goes, a shadow that dims the world, but it's constantly coming and going. Reality doesn't. The real is always here.
And that's what I meant by we're always being pushed. Reality is always here. Sometimes it expresses itself in a bump or a bruise. Sometimes it's a moment of just piercing beauty. But there's always some connection to the world for which we can wake up.
Steve.
So in the text, they pretty much say that the Vajra master is a person that you connect with, and yet you're kind of implying that it might, the embodiment of the Vajra master may be found in reading a text or bumping into an experience from another source, so that it doesn't necessarily have to be a personal connection to an individual. Is that what you're saying?
I am, and yet it's completely unpredictable. We're experiencing it right now. We are connecting with this very profound teaching without having Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche here in the room. This has happened over and over through the centuries. And sometimes it's given magical descriptions, the connection to the teachings. Sometimes it's just somebody waking up. But we work with what we've got.
All right, thank you.
Lane.
Isn't the view of myself as a separate individual jumping off of a cliff itself samsaric? Well, what's the better way to describe this jumping off a cliff, I guess? Do you see what I'm saying?
No.
Well, I think I do, but I think the point is that most of the time we are caught up in a relative point of view where we do think we do exist. And like Kurt said, we reach a point in our practice where we begin to feel some fear. And I've certainly experienced that, and I'm assuming other people have as well. What we're talking about is being able to let go further. And yes, from an ultimate point of view, there is no self to jump off a cliff. But from a relative point of view, we believe that there is. And that's what he's asking. In jumping off the cliff, what we're letting go of is precisely that relative view.
That helps.
Relatively.
Yeah, I guess perhaps I was mixing the relative and the absolute.
Shinyi?
Thank you. I'm wondering if you can provide an example of interpreting and reinterpreting the Vajrayana teaching that he said is a bad thing to do. Like, is there maybe a story that you can share, or it's just I can't quite wrap my head around what he's talking about.
I don't remember. Do you remember that, Michael? Right, exactly what he meant then?
I think what he was talking about was interpreting the teachings in a way to make ourselves comfortable rather than dealing with the very, as he would say, raw and rugged quality of experience.
Okay, so I'll just read the quote. You should not try to rationalize the Vajrayana. You cannot afford to interpret and reinterpret the world of Vajrayana at all. Whether philosophically, psychologically, practically, or however you might do it, you have to stick with the true Dharma. There's no choice. You should remember that. And he is the last subsection, sticking with the Dharma, and he elaborate some more. But I think what you said makes sense. Michael.
I think what he's saying is that really what we're being enjoined to do is to give up any kind of aggrandizement, any kind of collection, any kind of building up, you know. And if we do use the Vajrayana to build ourselves up in some way, however subtly, it becomes a perversion and will only lead to further suffering. So we can't turn the Vajrayana into some kind of credential. Like, look at me, I'm a tantric practitioner, woo-woo.
Thank you.
That's the way I took it. But Michael, did you have any other ideas?
No, I think that's sort of what I meant, but it's some kind of interpretation that supports ego rather than cuts ego.
Right. There are plenty of people who do that, you know, who take these exotic forms, the Vajrayana, and wear them like badges and sell them, you know. That happens. And I mean, it's what he's inveighing against at the beginning of the sadhana of Mahamudra. It was happening back in 1968, and it's still going on. Miriam.
Yeah, I'm glad we're talking about this Vajra master, because it's a point that keeps reoccurring. This question of, do we need a master, Vajra master, who's there in person? And when these teachings were done and when this book was written, everything was happening in person. And I'm wondering, my question to you is, do you think that you would have had the same transformational experience had Chogyam been talking to you through Zoom, for example, if there hadn't been this in-person component? Because that's different. There's different energies there, right? And I'm wondering if we're not stuck with certain limitations just by virtue of the delivery, which is way better than not having anything. But yeah, so because when I imagine these teachings in person, I imagine the Vajra master, you know, kind of provoking you, pushing you, depending on where you are, right? That there's something very personal about it and provocative about it too sometimes. And I don't know if that's possible virtually.
I don't know if it is either. But I mean, sometimes, you know, in the past, the relationship has been described as being one-on-one, you know, Tilopa and Naropa, that kind of thing. On the other hand, there's the story of the Buddha who was teaching, and he gave this tremendously profound teaching, and he looked out and nobody got it. And then he looked and he saw, and he said, oh, Madgalyana got it. You know, he could see one person who got it. He said, and he acknowledged that. You know. So I don't think there are any rules. And the other thing is that I always remember Khandro Rinpoche, the only female Tibetan Rinpoche I know, and a wonderful teacher. And she was asked basically these same questions. How do you find a Vajra master to have, with whom to have a personal relationship? And her response was, you may never find in this lifetime. There's just no telling. And you also may not need it. It depends on each individual.
Thank you.
But I think that what he's emphasizing is the tremendous power of that personal relationship. And yes, I agree with you. I think Zoom, personally, I think Zoom is a filter.
Mm-hmm.
The virtual world. Barrier.
It's not going to push you over the edge, let's just say.
Well,
Might not, but maybe insight is possible through the readings, I guess, and teachings.
But it does have to take place, that what he's describing, in a very personal way between two people. Or at least, yeah, it's a very personal connection.
And it also comes down to our openness to being pushed. A push to one person can be encouragement and support, and to another person, outright assault.
Yeah, how open we are. Definitely. There's a huge need on the part of the student to open to the teachings. Trip.
So, see if I can articulate this. So, in reading this third version, this third edition of the book, and starting to learn about the Vajrayana, are we, by virtue of studying it, reading it, are we opening the door to possibilities as opposed to reading about a next stage down the road?
As opposed to what?
As opposed to studying what might be in the future, by virtue of reading and studying and discussing, I feel like we are opening up possibilities for increased insights.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. This is a magic.
It's not sequential.
This is a magic box, this book. That's the way I feel about it.
Thank you.
So we should have more in-person retreats, you think?
Yes.
Like we had, that one was good at Karma Churling. If you have thoughts about this, let us know. Let Michael and me and Barry and let us know. Because otherwise we just might wait another year. And we're getting kind of old.
Yeah.
Some of us.
If we have a moment, I wanted to read just a piece because this chapter, unlike many, is actually just one single seminary talk as opposed to several put together. So I actually went back to the transcripts and looked it up, and I realized that I think the person who did, Judy Leaf, and the people who did the editing did a fantastic job of putting this together. But the one thing that I do think is sometimes missing is the quality of question and answer. That was also part of the seminary. And in fact, what they've done in some cases is taken material that came up in the question and answer and put it into, part of the overall presentation of the chapter. So I just wanted to read, because actually one important part of this, the part that I was talking about, actually came from question and answer. So if I could just read this. So it begins with the student asking, I've been trying to put together the picture of Mahayana that we had before, in other words, from the Mahayana section that preceded Vajrayana. I've been trying to put together the picture of Mahayana that we had before with what you're saying now, and I've been wondering what happened to the heroic aspect of Mahayana. Trungpa Rinpoche. That becomes Vajra, monolithic. We're talking about that. Student. And the sense of being willing to enter the situation immediately with no hesitation? Trungpa Rinpoche responds, not even a sense, actual experience, willing to do so and actually just doing it. You just dive in. Student. So that very much carries over then? Trungpa Rinpoche. Yes, indeed. Student. Also, I was wondering from the Mahayana's point of view, what is the logic that sees the need to go beyond Mahayana into Vajrayana? Trungpa Rinpoche, because they begin to feel the whole thing is not diamond-like enough, Vajra-like enough. They may have heard of and possibly experienced the Vajra Samadhi, but a furthering of that adamantine quality has not been presented to them, so they're still hungry. It's as if the Hinayanas had a good breakfast and the Mahayanas had a great lunch, but now they're looking for a fantastic dinner party. It's that kind of approach that they are not completely fulfilled. Things have been executed heroically, but still nothing is fulfilled. What's for me? What's for the others? What is it all about? The whole thing still hasn't altogether functioned. Student: is that related to the idea that the Mahayanas can never quite be in the world because they are always regarding samsara as something to be gotten beyond? Trungpa Rinpoche: yes, that's right. That you've got it. Yes, that's right. Yes. There's no idea of transmutation. That hasn't taken place. Student: thank you.
And I think what transmutation means here is seeing that this world, right now, this world is it. That there is no beyond, that it's all here. And then the world gets transmuted. Instead of it being grayed out as being sort of something that you're on the way to something else. And you're just here momentarily as you're on your way. Instead of that, this is it. And it's beautiful and it's meaningful. And it goes on and on and on. Constantly changing, constantly offering new challenges. Meg.
Yeah, that sentence that you just said, Philip commented on it before, and so I took my hand down, but I found that really profound, that this is it. This samsaric world is not something to be got around, but to be embraced. It's a little confusing to me. So I'm wondering, like, I can understand the concept of it, but does the experience of it come as like a sort of epiphany or something? Like, because I can get my mind around the idea that this is it, the samsaric world is it. And what else needs to happen? Like, are my eyes suddenly going to open and I see it differently?
What makes this the samsaric world is not the color of the walls and the sky and the sound of the voice and all those things. What makes it samsaric world is wishing that it were more. That's what goes. And realizing there is no more. This is it, and it's really something. This world, it's magical.
Do you think the perception of that changes? Or it's just a different understanding?
No, I think the perception changes. The actual visual perception, sensual perception changes.
Something to look forward to.
At any time. I mean, when we step out and suddenly, the quality of the day hits you. Who was it? Oh, yeah. Maxwell, Roberta, sent me a photograph from where they are in Palm Desert of a double rainbow, absolutely luminous. Well, that's a phenomena, but that luminosity can be experienced lots of ways. We're being enjoined to open our eyes to it. Somebody?
Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, what Meg just brought up really struck a chord. And it went back to something that actually Meg brought up a while ago about chop wood, carry water. It's like I can say, I can attest to the perception does change. And the perception of, like, Isn't there something more in life? Like after this class, the meaning of my life is to take out the garbage. That's the meaning of life, right there. You know, and there was a point where somehow I just kind of got that. You know, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. It's just your perception of what it means to chop wood, carry water, or what it feels like to chop wood, carry water, right? Like this is life, right? This is what we have to do. It is the samsaric world, but it's, you know, I think we're all plagued often. I am, at least, with, come on, what's life about? There's got to be more to it than this, right? And that constant searching is what keeps me away from this is it. I mean, this is it. Sometimes the meaning of life is taking out the garbage and washing the dishes. And that's the meaning of life, right? Right now, that's the meaning of life. Anyway, that's what I got.
Philip.
So to piggyback on what everyone is saying, to you, Dan, I think there's another way of looking at it. So recently we've been talking about flashing on the sacred world, right? And over the last months or years, I've heard every single one of you say something like this. Well, for this moment, I watched leaves fall off this tree, and it was a miracle. It was a stunning beauty. Of course, that happens every day, but just for a moment, we saw that. We saw it for that moment.
Thank you. Karen Sue.
Dan, I loved what you said. However, when you said it's what we have to do, and my take on it, it's what we get to do. It's not what we have to do. It's what we get to do. And so thanks for bringing that for me.
That's a good point, because that's a remnant of my samsaric, looking for more, more, right? I have to. Thank you.
Barry.
Well, I had a couple of thoughts about this, that I think there can be a little bit of a danger in kind of romanticizing the idea of there's the beautiful sunset and it blows your mind, that it's actually possible to reside in a world where everything is fascinating and vivid and painful and joyful. Everything is going on because you're not interpreting it. And when you really let it in, there's a lot of times where, I look at a tree and I come to tears, or or a dog turd, or this existence we have is of such richness and complexity and wonder, is so far beyond the ability of anyone to really understand it all, that then you can just, it is what it is. That's kind of my take on
it. Thank you. Oh, Linda. You're unmuted, Linda.
Yep, I got it. I wrote something down and I guess I just wanted to ask, to share it and to ask as well, right? So I'm thinking that when the student is ready, right, the teacher shows up, and that it's some kind of personal experience that draws us here. And it's a shift in that keeps us here. And that maybe the very analysis and processing that is being sought is what these teachings are designed to dispense with. So it's a very, it sounds like to me, and it's a very tender balance of giving up that which may prevent you from jumping off that cliff, right? Because you have to dispense with something you're accustomed to and you're used to. And that's a scary thing. I mean, that can be really tough. You know, that's a big unknown. And as Barry had said, that things are beyond interpretation, that maybe they're much simpler than the processing that we're asking for here, as far as what is going to happen, or what things feel like, or I don't know if I'm overthinking that, but I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Lane, you had something else?
Yeah, I just had a thought I wanted to share about the subject that Meg brought up about samsara. I mean, my understanding is that ultimately samsara and nirvana really don't exist. That the only reason we think they exist is because we have this comparison mind. After an experience of perceiving the nature of mind, it just seems like nirvana because we have this reference point of having been in samsara for so long. But I mean, when we're really in the moment, of course, things will continue to be magical, but it'll be ordinary at the same time. That's kind of the way I look at it. Not there yet, far from there, but it's the way my head thinks about it.
That's part of the chant we do in the morning.
Yeah. Well, perhaps we should end. What do you think? Oh, we have somebody?
There's one more.
Short. It's nice to be here. Hi, everybody. It's my first time here. I wanted to say a quote by Korean Zen Master Kyobong that kind of relates to what Lane said. If you really want to wake up and see your true nature, throw both nirvana and samsara into the garbage. I thought that was pretty powerful.
Throw them into the what?
Into the garbage. If you want to see your true nature, throw both nirvana and samsara into the garbage. That's pretty relevant to what we kind of touched upon today. Thank you very much.
Thank you and welcome.
Well, okay. I'll put up the chats, and who is leading? Oh yeah, Megan Kurt.
Our battery's about to run out, so if we go away.
Oh, you're saying goodbye? Who led? I've forgotten.
You did.
Senior moment.
Oh, go ahead, Meg.
Yeah, we can do it. We'll
go for it.
Thank you. I'll put them up. And I'm going to mute all at the same time.
We'll close with a prayer for peace, and then we'll dedicate the merit earned by our practice for the benefit of all sentient beings.
I'm going to mute everybody. So Megan, Kurt, unmute yourselves. Thank you.
by the blessings of enlightened and compassionate ones, by the power of my positive actions of 3 times, and my prayers of pure aspiration, may wars, conflicts, epidemics, and all their maladies dissolve in this world, and may the earth and all who live on this earth enjoy the abundance of well-being. May all learn to live lovingly with each other. By this merit may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy of wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great East, may the lotus garden of the Rigdom's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Yes, indeed. Thank
Everyone.
See you all.
Thank you.
everyone.
You too, Philip.
Nice discussion.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you, everyone. Tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.